lille timen, hvor vi forhåpentligvis skal få litt mer innblikk i den operaen som har premiere neste torsdag, Macbeth fra Mtsensk av Dmitrij Sjostakovitsj. Først, det noen av dere som ikke snakker norsk? Som ikke forstår norsk? That's a very good point, isn't it? Are there anybody among you who don't speak Norwegian and don't understand Norwegian? Everybody understands Norwegian. Because we will speak some Norwegian, but then some English. We have our maestro Oleg Kaitani, who does not speak Norwegian, so we will do some conversation in English, but we will switch. And I was thinking, if everybody understands Norwegian, we can have part of the conversation in Norwegian and part of it in English. So that's what we're going to do. Før vi starter, så skal jeg få ønske også velkommen til de som skal være med og prate i dag. Det Ole Anders Tandberg, som regissør for forestillingen. Ole Anders, han allerede nærmest en husregissør alene her. Det tredje gangen du jobber her på operaen, Ole Anders. Han har gjort Monteverdis 2 operaer, Poppeas kroning og Ulysses hjemkomst tidligere. Han selvfølgelig en godt etablert og kjent regissør også innenfor taleteater. Jobbet på Nationalteatret, på det Norske teatret, ene suksessen etter det andre, men har de siste 10-12 årene eller noe sånt vært bosatt og jobbet fast på Stadsteateren i Stockholm, men også på Dramaten i Stockholm, og ikke minst på Operaen i Stockholm, hvor Ole Anders har gjort den ene operaoppsetningen etter det andre. Så vi glad for å ha det her, Ole Anders. Takk. Da kan jeg få deg plass. Så har vi hele Norges sjefpsykiater, Trine Skårderud. Behøver antageligvis ingen nærmere presentasjon, kjent fra både bøker, intervjuer og en svært aktiv skribent. Ikke bare innenfor sitt eget fagfelt, men en dreven filmkritiker, har vært engasjert i flere spørsmål som også gjelder den kunstformen, eller innenfor kunstfeltet som vi jobber med. Det skal bli interessant å høre litt hvordan Finn og Ole Anders skal snakke om dette stykket, som nærmest kan være en sånn lærebok i freudianske fortrengningsmekanismer, og i hvert fall uansett så det en opera som blir et innblikk i bestialitetens vesen. Ja. Hyggelig at du kommer hit. And then we have Oleg Kaitani, who is a conductor who has done a long, amazing career, conducted at most European major opera houses. This year he did quite remarkable Tosca at Covent Garden. You have been the musical director of a couple of opera houses, and we are very happy to have you here. You did a wonderful Madame Butterfly with us 2 years ago, and it's wonderful to have you back. Oleg Kaitani is, as you may hear from his name, Oleg is very Russian, and Kaitani is Italian, and so he is half Russian, half Italian. His father was Russian and his mother Italian. So he studied in Russia, and he knows the work of Shostakovich very well. I'm looking forward to speak to you later. But first we will start with some music. And we har 2 av hovedrolleinnehaverne med oss. Det Svetlana Sostateleva.
Great.
Ja. Som spiller rollen som Katarina. Og så det Magne Fremmeliv som med oss. Magne. Han kommer etter hvert. Skal vi liksom sette i gang? Han kommer som han tre. Der han, vet du. Han skal ha en liten teatralsk entré. Men Magne Fremmeliv i hvert fall ensemblemedlem her. Skal synge og spille rollen som Boris, som jeg vil mene noe av det mest forferdelige rollen som skrevet. Altså et større udyr, en verre person enn Boris har ikke jeg sett i operalitteraturen. Så det en utfordring for Magne, for han egentlig utrolig snill. Men i alle fall, Svetlana og Magne, og ved piano så har vi Julia Stelchenko, vår korrepetitør og pianist. Og før vi går så langt at vi begynner, så tenkte jeg, Ole Anders, si du, dette for øvrig en litt utfordring, da. Vi har aldri hatt denne innføringen her i foajeen før. Vanligvis har vi hatt det enten inne på scenen 2 eller i forbindelsessenteret bak der. Men det funker sånn ganske ålreit så langt, så folk går litt fram og tilbake. Men hvis vi blir litt forstyrret innimellom, så forstår vi hvorfor. Ole Anders, skal ikke du fortelle litt om hva vi nå skal få høre og se?
Jo, eller jeg kan vel bare si litt om hva vi har sett, da. Og det jo ikke så mye. Da skal jeg fortelle litt om det som dere ikke får se, for at jeg skal forstå dere kommer til å se. Så det vi har sett frem til nå egentlig bare Katarina som står utenfor huset og kjeder seg, noe så fryktelig. Alle har noen, og hun har ingenting. Mauren har et bo, og hun den eneste som ikke har noe. Annet enn det som kommer nå, når denne musikken begynner. Hennes ektemann, som hun har giftet seg med for 3-4 år siden, viser seg å være impotent. Og en fryktelig utilfredsstillende samlivspartner for henne. Og svigerfaren som Per ganske riktig sier, en tyrann. Man har en følelse at han går og snuser på henne om natten i sengekammeren, og for å hoppe til det vi ikke får se, så kommer Magne da i sin neste arie og gestalter den her hustyrannen som en som hater sin egen sønn for hans impotens, og som til slutt, efter den neste arien han har, på vei til soverommet for å ta henne. Og dette eksplisitt i verket. Dette ikke noe som jeg har funnet på. Det ikke noe moderne regigrep, for å si det sånn. Da vi kommer så langt i operaen, viser det seg at Katarina allerede har en elsker i soverommet. Og det vel noe av det vi skal snakke om litt mer etterpå. Nå altså til det første møtet for Boris og Katarina. Vær så god.
Sada by kakovaný odmala sád, a cepič na obracný nad ušem nás pichaješ. Ječtali si svoj sabor, čobanky s mužmi, lidni kivleni.
Tusen hjertelig takk. Da tar vi plass her oppe, så ser de oss i hvert fall godt nok. Ja, som dere hørte, så er det ingen lystig operette. Det er et ganske voldsomt drama, men det er ikke blottet for humor. Kanskje du, Ole Anders, først skal si litt om hva dette handler om? Utover det vi allerede har fått vite?
Ja, det er kort. Når vi gjør det kort versjon, så Boris er jo en representant for det miljøet hun lever i, da, som er, for å si, et veldig rått og mannssjåvinistisk miljø. Det neste som skjer her det som skjer etter dette møtet er en komponert, altså gruppevoldtekt. Der hovedpersonen da, på en måte ikke forstår hva som er for feil med dette. Hun skriker, og vi har det bare gøy. Når nettopp Katarina kommer og irettesetter de arbeiderne på det stedet de er da. Paradoksalt så er det jo denne mannen hun blir forelsket i, og etter hvert blir han hennes elsker. Og når ektemannen Sinobi, som vi hørte om her, kommer hjem, så dreper de han også, etter at de først har drept Boris, da, som vi så her, med rottegift. Så kveler de og slår ihjel Sinobi. Han blir begravet i kjelleren. Og kanskje det mordet da, i hvert fall i Sjostakovitsjs versjon, gjør noe med Katarina. Hun blir ødelagt. På en måte den lykke som de forventer seg skal skje etterpå, med bokstavelig talt lik av ektemannen begravet i kjelleren under det at de gifter seg, den innfinner seg jo ikke da. Snarere tvert imot så blir liket oppdaget av en av bryllupsgjestene. Når han er ute og leter etter mer sprit. Og politiet kommer og arresterer de. Og tross at Sergej forsøker å bestikke de, så blir de sendt til Sibir. Da inntreffer noe hos Katarina som kanskje er veldig spesielt, og som er grunnen kanskje også til at de blir sendt dit. Altså hun erkjenner mordet med en gang. Før noen egentlig har spurt om det, så har hun erkjent det. Og fra det punktet så blir hun på en måte kvitt all sin angst og blir fri. At hennes kjærlighet går over i et slags guddommelig stadium, da. Der hun kan leve på disse øyeblikkene hun har med Sergej ute i Sibir gjennom at hun bestikker vakten og får komme over til mennene på natten. Sergej derimot tåler jo ikke synet av henne lenger. Hun har forrådt ham og sparker henne bort. Og fra å få øynene på henne bedrar henne med en annen kvinne i denne fangeleiren, nærmest for å demonstrere, liksom. Hvorpå hun da går, kan du si, en slags ytterligere reise da ned mot at hun blir bestialsk da, og dreper denne elskerinnen og seg selv i slutt. Det er absolutt ikke guddommelig lenger når stykket slutter med dette, da. Det er vel i korte drag. Ja. Og så det du spurte om var jo egentlig hvor er det morsomme i det her.
Ja, ja, men altså det
bare på det også.
Ole Anders, he now made a short resume of the plot in the opera. And I started to say that it is, of course, a very brutal and ruthless history. But it's not without humor, for instance. And then Ole Anders said where that does come in, for instance, in the music. Can you say something? I mean, in an opera, you have a plot. And then you have an orchestra who's telling the story behind the plot. Sometimes you can say that the real story is being told in the orchestra and not on the stage. So if you want to understand opera, you have to listen to the music and not only look at the stage. And it's not always that the music is corresponding with what is going on the stage. And I think that is also a quite interesting aspect in this piece. So Oleg, maybe you can say something about the musical composition of the piece.
Yeah, well, having a psychiater and psycholog bias, what I can say first is the psychology of the music is incredible. Some people have said that Katerina is a Madame Bovary, and that is wrong. She's not at all Madame Bovary, she's not dreaming of better life. But Boris is a Madame Bovary. He dreams of living in a big town, he feels he is a man of world, and there comes waltzes, and there come polkas and things in the music who describe what he remembers of his youth. Perhaps his youth was always there in Mtsensk, but he has developed the idea that he was in a world more refined, and the psychology is so strong in the music. Actually, if we read the text of Leskov is more brutal than the libretto we have. But the music, Leskov is the one who wrote the short story, yes? It's a short story or a big short story or a short novel, how you want to see it. And it's still more brutal in the words, in the vulgarity. But in this opera, the music makes it terrifying, brutal, vulgar, sentimental, beautiful, tender. It's rare that Shostakovich is tender. The erotic element in Shostakovich is, you find it often, but the tenderness that you can find, and now I can't say how is the production, how did Uli direct it, because if not you won't come, you don't have the surprise. But he accentuates his tenderness also very beautifully. And so the psychology is very, very much in the music, and I hope you will feel it the same way when you see it.
Thank you. Maybe one more question about the music before we go into the psychology of it. It was first performed in 1934, and then some few years later Stalin visited the performance. It was a huge success, and it was his second opera, and it was his last opera. And he was very young, Shostakovich. He was 26. Amazing. And Stalin was very upset. And he wrote, or it was written, an article in Pravda just a couple of days later, where the piece was really destroyed by the official politicians. And it was taken away from the
all the theaters, all
theaters were taken away because it was too dangerous somehow. Maris Jansson said once that if Stalin would have understood not only the words but the music, he would have been killed immediately. Yeah. Just talking about what is said in the music and what is said on stage. And then he was more or less forced to rewrite opera. We don't know really. I mean, he probably had a desire. He was 26 when he wrote it, so probably he wanted to develop it somehow also. And then it was rewritten, or how do you put it, Oleg? It was another version?
Well, it's a good question. It's really another version. It's in a time where Shostakovich wasn't obliged anymore. So one can see it how one wants, that he wanted this opera to be played, and he corrected it. That is one way of seeing. So there's a part of the opera that is very Mussorgsky, inherited of Mussorgsky, as if he would be a sort of spiritual son of Mussorgsky. And perhaps that's what I feel. He wants to accentuate it in a more epic opera, putting more the accent on that, and it's more vocally more easy to sing, the second version. This one is extreme in everything. And perhaps we have to see it like another thing. This surely for our time, for our taste, for what we know now of the 20th century music and 21st century music already, we are more fascinated by this version, by this first version. It's more original, it's more crazy, it's more various musically.
And somehow also more brutal, right? It's
and more brutal.
Rougher, yeah.
And just to add something to what you said, the horrible thing was not only the bad article, because we get all bad critics and bad reviews, so I think we got used to it, yes. And through the years, and Shostakovich was certainly not someone who would be offended by a bad review. That wasn't the fact. The fact that first, and one never speaks about that, the review was anonymous. There was no signature, no name. We don't know who wrote until now this review. And receiving an anonymous letter, I don't know if someone of us have received, but it's something terrible. And an anonymous review is an open letter that is anonymous. There's a cowardness, there's a nastiness about that. So it was an enormous shock for Shostakovich, also because of that, and because the anti-democratic fact that an opera that had success wasn't played anymore.
Yeah, and you must bear in mind, this happened 3 years before the Moscow...
The terror.
The terror started, yeah. And Stalin had, liquidated like a couple of million people already.
Yes.
I mean, it was no secret that this was happening. A couple of years later, they tell the story about Shostakovich being investigator. Got his eyes on him. He was asked to come to the office. Do you know this guy who and this and this? Yes, he says he's a friend of mine. Oh, really? It's a friend of yours? Do you know when this friend of yours was at this date? No, Shostakovich answered. Well, go back home, think about it, come back on Monday. Maybe you'll remember. Shostakovich knew that on Monday I'm a dead man, So he said goodbye to his wife, his family. It was over. He was going into concentration camp that Monday. He comes to the police station, goes to the reception, says, I'm Dmitry Shostakovich. Yes, I'm called to come out today. Well, your name is not on the list. Who were you here to meet? Well, I was here to meet Commissary this and that. Oh, the receptionist said, well, he's not in today. Come back Wednesday. And he never heard anything more. And now this Commissary this and that, he was arrested on Sunday evening. And that saved, you know, Shostakovich's life. Because of bureaucracy, everything, nobody ever looked in that file again until Stalin was dead. But he was, you know, so close. And that was the life of those people. And that's what's in all his symphonies somewhere. You know, this fear, this agony, this anxiety, it's there, you know, even when he writes the birthday symphony for Stalin, you know, it's all there. A friend says to him, you can't write music like this, he's gonna see, he's gonna look through it. Looks like people whistling in the streets, you know. It's not a symphony.
That's a terrifying
So that's
story.
the way he lived his life. And I think it's in this music too, you know. It's really the anarchy of the music, the power of freedom in this music, which maybe was more scary to Stalin than the actual murder of a theatrical tyrant. Yeah.
The humor, the music, the erotic
Yes.
of the music, all that in a dictatorship can be right wing or left wing, or a dictatorship doesn't like humor, doesn't like erotic, and so.
And the tragedy of the piece, you know, Stalin wanted everybody to be happy.
Yeah.
The fact that Shostakovich wrote music about the tragedy of life, which is what life is, you know. We're born, we grow up, and then we know we're going to die. Now that's the tragic experience of life. Somewhere this is going to end in death.
So
And for Stalin, of course, that's anti-communist propaganda, because communist propaganda want this. Everybody's happy. The reason to live is to create the communist state together, you know. And every thought against that, musically, culturally, is of course threatening to.
the absurd thing is that Shostakovich was from a communist family. In the Tsar time, his grandfather was put in Siberia because he was a communist. And he believed in communism deeply. So the absurd thing is that a man who believed so much in it, and many pieces are speaking about it, yes, with enthusiasm, was criticized because the way he believed in it wasn't the right way. In any case, this is an opera that is also wants to be a criticism to all Russia, to the Tsarist Russia, to the decadence of it, to the brutality in part of it, and this is also a part we can't ignore completely. Yes, it's both things and allusions, as you say, obviously to the new Russia, because so many people were deported. So this last picture in Siberia also has certainly a relationship to already the terror beginning in old Russia, when in the villages in Siberia they saw the prisoners going on, they always put, was a tradition, something in front of the door, something to eat, something to dress, to be warm, and in the Stalin time that was forbidden. So it was still much, much harder, all that, yes.
But it's even also quite straightforward satire or criticism of the police. The police scene is almost making fun of the police.
Of the police of all Russian times, of the bureaucracy of all Russian times. Like in Gogol and like in Chekhov, yes, it's always criticized this whole police that doesn't move. And musically, it's also this static is very strong. And now psychologically, because we want our...
Yes, we have to. Let's just conclude this. The original story has never been performed in, well, the original version from 34 has never been performed in Norway before. We performed, the Norwegian opera did it in 1975, I believe it was, the Katarina Ismailova, which is the second version, the revised version, which is a bit more romantic and epic, as you said. So it's also for the very first time that the Norwegian audience has a chance to see this. We should dig into the
psychology. Just one last word to say.
Yes,
one
please.
It is fascinating how psychology in music is described. And one very important moment is boredom. Why is all this happens? Because boredom improv in a little town, boredom of Katerina, who is a woman of the people, to be a rich lady who doesn't know what to do of her life. Now, boredom in music is very, because you can be bored very easily, yes, it's quite a, and it's great how the opera begins with an aria. It's rare already that it begins with an aria in opera, and where really boredom is described in music without you being bored, yes?
Exciting boredom.
Well, Finn, du har sett litt på stykket og har funnet sikkert interessant stoff for en psykiater. Men det er veldig morsomt å høre også på Sorry if I change. Også på ordlegg som snakker om kompleksiteten, altså den psykologiske rikheten i musikken. Og det er jo litt fristende bare å gi litt hjelp til oss en historikk her når det gjelder tekst. Det heter jo Lady Macbeth, dette her, og det er jo Shakespeare Lady Macbeth som ble dronning av Skottland, for hun drev sin mann Macbeth til et mord, men så får hun skyldfølelse, og så tar hun sitt liv. Og så kommer det en russisk forfatter som heter Leskov og skriver denne kortromanen, eller lange novellen, hvor Katarina er ond. Men så kommer Sjostakovitsj og gjør henne ond og god, eller han gjør henne mye mer sammensatt. Altså dette er jo modernitet. Mennesket er ikke som i Gammeltestament svart eller vondt, eller det er ikke skjebnedrevet, men det er en psykologisk veldig rik konstruksjon. Og det har jeg lyst til å spørre deg om. Altså, hvordan nærmer du deg dette veldig sammensatte fenomenet? Altså, hvem er din Katarina i dette her?
Hun er jo nettopp en sånn som du beskriver da. Å nærme meg det, det er jo gjennom å lytte på alle nyanser i musikken og være, hva skal man kalle det, tro da, mot de. Og også kanskje, som jeg var inne på i det første jeg sa, ta ut det som er der, altså av utvikling hos henne. Og det er jo ikke noe jeg finner på, det er virkelig skrevet sånn. At i samme øyeblikk som Sergej bestikker politisjefen med de penger hun har bedt han gå for å hente, som er hele denne familiens samlede formue i sedler, så er det aldri sagt noe mer arrester dem før hun har bekjent. Hvilket er veldig merkelig. Og da må man jo gå inn og tolke det som at hun velger fangenskap og kjærligheten framfor livet og løgnen da. Det er jo å leve på en løgn, altså komme unna med mordet. Og det er jo veldig sånn forsøk på å løse nettopp Shakespeares Lady Macbeths problem, som jo blir gal og dør av at hun aldri får vasket blod av henne. Og dette er jo det som preger Katarina fra gjennom hele tredje akten fram til hun blir arrestert. Og så er det utviklingen gjennom fjerde akten, fra den ariaen hun har der, eller den lille scenen hun har der med Sergej, før hun gjennom sin egen aria, som ligner faktisk på Othellos, altså, når han står over Desdemona og skal drepe henne, hvor han oppsummerer alt han kunne stå ut med, liksom. Han kunne klare alt, han kunne klare til og med forakt og hånen og latteren. Men det, sier han, å finne at der hvor jeg har gjemt mitt hjerte, der bor noe en annens, liksom, i denne kroppen som han ser framfor seg. Det klarer han ikke. Og det er også hennes problem. Men da er det jo at, hvorfor dreper hun ikke Sergej? Da hadde hun jo dødt. En slags heroisk forklarende selvmordhandling. Nei, hun går til liksom et veldig usselt mord, altså, på elskerinnen hans. Som egentlig allerede er halvdød. Du vet, de er jo på første arian når de går mot Sibir, handler jo bare om denne veien der det bare er lik og knokler og blod som bare blir flere og flere, etter hvert som flere og flere går der. Det er ikke noe liv. Så hvorfor myrde en gang til? Og det er, tenker jeg, siste mordet er liksom et sjalusimord, og det er liksom ikke noe heroiserende eller vakkert med det hele tatt. Så hun blir akkurat så ussel som et usselt menneske i slutten. Og det ganske fantastisk. Men alt dette står jo der. Metoden jo bare å lytte til det som
Ja, for du sier at du ikke har laget noen moderne regigrep. Altså den kompleksiteten ligger der. Men det for å holde oss til henne da, altså, det en kvinne vi kan forstå? Altså kan vi identifisere oss med dette sammensatte og det usle og det vakre? Og,
ja. Du kan si at det mest paradoksale og kontroversielle, og som kanskje blir veldig vanskelig å svelge, det jo problematikken som veldig veldig, hva sier jeg, lite politisk korrekt, da. Det jo dette faktum at det en historie om en kvinnes seksualitet med en mannlig forteller som beskriver en kvinnes seksualitet som om at hun blir kåt på en voldtektsmann. Det jo veldig besværlig, da. Den verste forøveren i denne gruppevoldtekten, Sergej, får hun lyst på. Ja, vet jeg ikke. Men det jo en ubehagelig problematikk.
Men det besværlig?
Men det gjør det jo veldig interessant. Det det som poenget mitt. Fordi det en problematisering. Alle vi menn opplever det jo at det sånn, for å si det sånn da. At vi har ikke det som kvinner egentlig gjerne vil ha. Så jeg tror det mer et mannlig problem enn et kvinnelig problem. Uansett det et veldig menneskelig og vanskelig og utrolig allmenngyldig problematikk, da.
Men det jeg hører...
Men i musikken så blir hun jo også... Hun går jo fra virkelig bare å være brunst til å bli forelsket. Og elske ham. Livredd som hun for å bli drept av svigerfar. Ja, og der begynner du å leve da. Så, ja, du skulle si noe.
Nei, jeg blir sittende og tenke på at det var vel Per som sa Freud. Jeg hadde ikke nødvendigvis tenkt å si Freud, men kanskje jeg må si Freud allikevel. Fordi at vi lever i en kultur i dag hvor vi veldig sånn opptatt av det rasjonelle og det positive, og vi skal velge riktig og så videre. Men nå psykoanalysens radikalitet 100 år siden, det var jo at den løftet frem det primitive mennesket. Altså, vi vil gjerne ha kontroll, men det har vi ikke allikevel. Og så vil vi gjerne være edle, og så kommer det noe grums.
Ja.
Altså, det høres jo ut som om vi i nærheten av å utforske også noe smertefullt, og som Per sier, kanskje var det Stalin ikke likte. Altså at man utforsker ondskap, og kanskje på en eller annen måte forsøker å være empatisk, eller i hvert fall forstå noe av det fenomenet. Ikke bare forkaste det.
Jo, men jeg tror det ondskapen her det finnes ikke noe ondskap her, det finnes jo bare utilfredsstillelse her, tror jeg.
Og det liksom å drepe jo litt vondt, ikke det?
Jo, men hun dreper jo et slags selvforsvar.
Ja.
Men altså, det første mordet jo Boris, som vi så her, jo en tikkende bombe.
Ja.
Det som har skjedd før hun dreper ham, at han har pisket elskeren hennes halvt til døds. Det siste han sier lås han inn i kjelleren, jeg vil ha gleden av å drepe han i morgen. Så går han til Katarina og sier, gi meg litt soppstuing. Og etterpå, for det har han sagt i scenen før, jeg går inn til henne og tar henne. Og så begynner han å kle av henne, så sier han, du går så naken hele tiden, hvorfor gjør du det? Da har hun i og for seg allerede blandet gift i maten hans, så han dør. Men du kan si, det gjør hun jo dels for å redde livet på sin elsker, som innlåst i kjelleren, som hun har hørt skal dø i morgen, og for å forhindre at hun blir voldtatt. Og da kan man snarere si, ja, det en heroisk handling, da. Det et rettferdig mord. Hadde hun lagt frem dette i en rettssal i dag, kanskje hun...
Men Sjostakovitsj
et frikjent, i hvert fall for en veldig mild dom.
Ja,
så det ikke ondhet.
Nei, for Sjostakovitsj helt tydelig eksplisitt og sier at hans Katarina, som da myrder 3 ganger, ikke sant? I operaen. Han forsvarer henne sterkt og sier at hun en kvinne som man absolutt kan forstå, og han sier at hans sympati hos henne, og han vil beskrive en kvinne som han, om ikke om han ikke liksom legitimerer mordet, så forstår han det fullt ut.
Ja, det første.
Det første, i hvert fall.
Hvorfor Sinovic skal dø bare fordi han er impotent og rasende for at hun har en elsker, det er jo mer på kant.
Er det eksempler på...
Det skulle ingen rettspsykiater liksom... Jeg forstod at du var under press, men jeg mener, det er jo virkelig bare fordi hun ikke vet hva hun skal gjøre. Plutselig så kveler hun ham, og plutselig så er han død. Og så blir fra det øyeblikket livet hennes ødelagt. Det siste mordet, det er ren ondskap. Og da er hun ond.
Men hun har blitt ond, og er det ikke. Altså, jeg tror kanskje Shostakovich sier at dette er noe hun er blitt av omgivelsene.
Ja, jeg tror Shostakovich sier at in spite of my communist ideas of my youth, 1932, I live in a country where communism is making people, is destroying people. Yeah. Or
I would say no, 32 is a bit early.
Okay.
32 is a bit early. So 20s and let's say until 35 is Russia is like Italy of Renaissance. Geniuses come out.
Mm-hmm.
The constructivism and the futurism and everything is having such an evolution.
Mm-hmm.
32 begins a sort of censure. One doesn't play Stravinsky anymore because that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They played Stravinsky although he had remained in West. So they played until 35 and then was finished.
Mm-hmm.
So really the nightmare begins slowly in 35.
Mm-hmm.
The first big show process are 37. And then it goes away. What I think I've understood of what Pierre Boye was saying, that Shostakovich has a sympathy for Katerina that we musically feel, yes? But because Katerina has killed here too, in the novel 3 people, she hasn't done a lot in her life, so it's not a great example, yes? And she's not an emancipated woman, like Soviet Union wanted, women who work and who do and who, she was the contrary. So we can't have great sympathy for her when we don't hear the music. The music is so beautiful when she sings of her boredom, of her, what she has done, of her love, that we just, through the music, we can only love her, yes? We found her beautiful and great. In the novel, she's not described as a beautiful woman, as a fascinating woman, but not beautiful. But we feel her beautiful through the music. Her music is so touching, so deep, so lovable. And Shostakovich had this wonderful love affair with his future wife, who was the big love of his life. Like Richard Burton and Liz Taylor, not many people know, they married, divorced and married again. So it was possible. Soviet Union, divorce wasn't a problem. And he loved her and he's dedicated to her. And it's in the years they met, they had, before the marriage, that he wrote the opera. From 30 to 34.
Men denne kompleksiteten vi snakker om, altså det er kanskje noe av kunstens natur, er at den kan utforske dette på en scene. Og så kan Ole Anders lage forestillinger på scenen, slik at vi kan forestille oss litt om hvordan det er å ha den type følelser. Altså ikke nødvendigvis sympati med tremord, men en slags type empati, at vi kan forstå noe av det. Og det synes jeg er jo interessant at vi har jo etter hvert mange karakterer som er veldig sammensatte, altså ikke for å trekke denne operaen ned, men altså det er jo interessant med Sopranos. Den forstand at jeg er jo veldig glad i ham, selv om han er et svin av en psykopat. Vi ser TV-serier som Breaking Bad. Altså, vi er jo veldig glad i han, selv om han ødelegger mennesker. Altså, det er noe med
Don Giovanni, for den saks skyld.
Ja, men det er jo så nettopp noe med at vi kan få liksom eksersert litt følelser på en scene.
Jo, men det er jo klart at hun er så interessant fordi hun er kompleks, og fordi hun også er menneskelig, da. Hun drar seg ikke, karakteren altså, drar seg ikke for å gjøre, jeg skal kalle det bare enkelt dumme ting.
Og så går hun jo for den absolutte ekstase. Altså, hun er jo en kvinne som er kompromissløs i å oppnå det hun vil, og når vi ser hvordan hun får Sergej, og hvordan de har det sammen, så tror jeg nok de fleste av oss tenker at det skulle gjerne opplevd.
Ja, de har jo et 16-manns brassorkester i Kjolven. Og det er heller ikke jeg som har funnet på, det er Sjostakovitsj. Så det er ganske heftig. Og det er jo en veldig, hva skal man kalle det for? I forestillingen, i min regi, da, så er de jo som alter ego av henne alle sammen, kan man si. Så det er jo hun som har den følelsen som musikken er. We're talking about La Banda, being all Katarina in different stages of her
Veldig kort.
career as a...
There is a banda in this score.
Yeah, this
16 people, and Ole Anders and Oleg, they have decided to put them on stage. So they are actually not playing in the pit or in the balcony or somewhere else, but they are acting on stage.
Yeah, it's very kind of you to say Ole Anders and Oleg. I would be proud. It's Ole Anders' idea.
But you supported it.
I was enthusiastic immediately. It's to have some, because you can't. The banda is like has a bad destiny, because if you want to put them in the pit with the other, there's not enough place, and everyone is like that, and the orchestra gets very angry because they hear them playing behind them. It's too loud. It's revolution. So if you put them in the public, they are sacrificed. Yes, suddenly one looks. You put them behind the stage, they are not strong enough. One does everything with microphones and it doesn't sound nice. And suddenly they are an important person of the whole play, with Ole Anders. They are part of it, and they are very, very active. Yes, I don't say more.
It's what we could say that they are, what we should tell them about it. Because it's interesting to talk about, and very interesting to talk about with a psychiatrist. So it's really because we moved the play to Norway, or to a Norwegian fantasy, and obviously, most people in this house have once in their lives played in the skolekorps, you know.
And some traumatized by that.
And some are traumatized.
Have you some clients?
And everybody's been, you know, the small one in this corps, aspirant, with 1 star and 1 medal, looking at the big ones with the tits and, you know, who are having a wild life when you go on tours, and you've been dreaming of being with the big ones in the band, you know, having, you know, go out, get drunk, etc. Now this, how many are they with us? 13. They are all Katarina in different stages of her career as a schoolcorps musician. Whether they are men or women, they're all playing this girl in the corps. Obviously, those years between 9 and 16, 17, were years which, at least in my experience, most of my energy was concerned about my sexual development. You know, I was thinking about sex all the time. So was Katarina. And obviously, when they are finally in the bedroom with Katarina and her lover playing this music, when she finally makes sex to him, obviously it's like an explosion of all those yearning for sex through all these years of being a band member, you know, it's very obvious that it all comes to this point, yes? And after playing, they're all exhausted and happy. And then they start again. So the interesting thing, and now I come to you, is that this band, they also play every time death is present in the action, when she feels threatened by death, when Sergei is about to die in the Passacaglia, etc. In the end, when we get closer to death. So they always play. They play either when it's sex or when it's death. And all I've done is really reading the script and seeing that this is what Shostakovich wanted. So they are the sound of sex and the sound of death. And obviously, this brings, you know, you think of this longing for sexual ecstasy and the longing for death as parallel sort of, well, this you know better than I do. I'm just saying that's the way it is. It interests me. It's an enigma of the whole piece, because there's no real answer to it. They play the last tone and that's the blackout, and she dies, you know? And they're there when she's finally, and that's the end. It's very, very fascinating.
But the way to see it is that I'm just listening to you and combining the two main drives of life. I mean, and this sounds like a bit Freudian. I mean, with the
I thought so.
energy of libido, the energy of life, the strive for living, and
That's
the
it.
other part of it is the thanatos, the drift for death, or the tragic knowledge about that this is the destiny. And it's interesting. I do not know that much about Shostakovich and his cultural influences, but Freudian psychoanalysis was revolutionary in Vienna, in Europe, and not at least in the early Soviet Union. It was very revolutionary, but it was also closed down by Stalin and ended up in what we know as Russian psychiatry or Soviet psychiatry. But it was a very vivid moment in the 20s with great inspiration from Freudian ideas, and that was about sexuality, not at least, about liberation.
Very interesting. I think we are running a bit out of
I
time.
I have
one thing.
psychology. I have also a question. I have also a question. But
I would just say in connection to that, because I saw a documentary where Shostakovich's daughter was a kind of nervous character, and she tells about her father, that the peculiar thing about him was that when he heard his music played, concerts or rehearsals, he was sitting like this, listening to his own music, holding his whole hand like this, she says, as he was terrified to hear it. Very, very fascinating. He should be, you know, we would think, but for him it was like something threatening coming out of what he wrote himself, you know? And I found that actually fascinating.
I understand why I find that totally fascinating. It's something about hidden drives and denial
And want and fear, you know, in the same creativity and destructivity, death, sex, death, or what you said, the Freudian expression.
Libido.
Yes. No, that's very. No.
it seems we don't have films of Beethoven and Bach listening to their music, but it seems from what we know, or what was written and letters and biographies, that it was similar. So the fear of not being played, the fear of not being understood, the fear of its own music that should really satisfy yourself. Yes, I think for a genius, Shostakovich was a real genius that we can compare to Bach and Beethoven and Mozart. I think for a big genius, it is terrifying. Now I have a last question that interests me. So two main psychological moments is how we in this opera live sex and death. And do you see something autodestructive in these persons, in this story? Is Boris Timofeyevich autodestructive? Is Katerina, is Sergei? Are they autodestructive in a certain way with this union between sex and death, and feeling death, and creating death, and killing?
Well, the covered answer might be yes and no, but I think it's tempting to say yes, it's auto-destructive, self-destructive in a way, because it's actually self-destructive. I mean, it doesn't end that well for them. But I think the interesting part, and stressing that this is not real life, that this is art, this is put on the scene, and I think it's a kind of investigation of the difficult and complex emotions of man. I think this is a very modern piece of art, because it really acclaims complexity instead of reducing things into romantic heroism. They say that we are so strange, we are so primitive, we are so great, we are so small, and that's, I think, much of the richness, and self-destruction is also part of the complexity of man, I think.
I think that's a very interesting aspect, that art in the 19th century, for instance, tend to be somehow moralistic and with a high ethos that they took part. I mean, Verdi was a revolutionary and was very clear who were the heroes and who were the bad guys. And in Shostakovich's world, you don't really know who are the bad guys. The bad guys are the good guys, and opposite. It's more similar to a Monteverdi universe or a Mozart universe, which also a kind of amoralité, amoral, where you show life as it is instead of sort of trying to manipulate it somehow.
But it's in the score. There's this music which goes bum 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 bum. Now that comes where there's no drama at all, apart from the fact that Sergei and Katerina's left alone in the room, like for a second. So this is really the music accompanying their first, glance before they're interrupted. Nothing has really been happening, nothing sexy, nothing erotic, nothing whatsoever. It's just this look with this music. And it sounds like, okay, but this is going, this is going to hell. You say auto-destructive. It's as if she knows from this moment, this path with him is going to lead to, sex and death.
And there, I think, is one of the fascinating things.
Whether she's conscious of it or not, it's not in the question, but we can hear it, quite obviously.
One of the fascinating things of this opera is, as you say, we remain from the story with a big question mark. Nothing is affirming. There's no affirmation in the story, and the music is so affirmative and so clear. When it's tragic, he puts the point on the tragedy in such a concrete and strong way. When it's funny, it's strongly funny. When it's grotesque, when it's happy. So the affirmation of something that remains like yes, like Proust, like it's with a big question mark at the end. Who is good, who is bad, who is both?
I think that was a very nice conclusion, Oleg, for this short conversation. It is already 6 o'clock, even past 6 o'clock. I would like to thank you, our audience, for coming here and listening to us, and would like to thank Ole Anders and Finn and Oleg for your contribution. As you have already seen and heard, we have some stunning singers in this show as well. Not only singers, but real actresses. I think out of this complexity we have heard now, it's impossible to put on some singers who are not able to act on stage, and I think you have had a quite good material to work on. I'm very excited about what's going to happen the next few days. Thursday in a week we have the opening night. Tomorrow you are able to come here and watch the last orchestra rehearsal on stage. It's free for everybody. We have open dag, day of the open house. A lot of things will be going on here. You will be able to hear a lot of our singers, not only the people in our ensemble, but we have some guests who are coming to sing for you. Take your children, take your family with you. Hope to see you in the show, and if you want to have something out of this magnificent opera by Dmitri Shostakovich, you have to open your eyes and not the least open your ears. So thank you very much.
Thank you.